And I, and I say this not because of what Barack has done. You know, we like to measure years of how many things you've done. But my view is that it is about character and integrity. It's about the choices that you make over your lifetime when people aren't looking. You know, I don't really want to know what you did when you decided to run for president. I want to know what you did before it was important. And that's who Barack is, somebody who has been living his life consistently with cameras on and off, making choices that reflected his values. You know, it starts with how he was raised, and everybody talks about Barack's exotic background, but it is different. You know, but in many ways the same as mine. You know, he grew up with a single parent, so it was a little harder. He didn't know his father. His mother was this young, 18-year-old girl from Kansas, this white woman raising a black kid, you know, and it was Barack at that. And she was a dreamer. She was naive. She had these visions of getting her PhD and working with women all over the country, working in Indonesia. And as a result of her naivete, sometimes they struggled financially, but Barack also got to live in a world in the way that many Americans don't. You know, when you live in countries that are dealing with global poverty, you get to see that and understand what that feels like. You have to understand traditions and cultures that are not like yours and learn to respect them without fear. And you know that a great nation like ours can have positive and negative impacts on little villages across oceans. And I just think, imagine a president of the United States who comes to the office with that kind of sensibility. And we haven't seen that in a while. And it doesn't stop there. Barack was also raised by Toot and Gramps, his maternal grandparents. Now, they were folks like my parents. The only difference was their race, but their values were the same. They were people who sacrificed and did what they had to do and didn't look at their passion, but they looked at what they needed to do to get through. And he learned from them values that I learned, and we're trying to share with our daughters, things like truth and honesty actually matter in life all the time. Your word is your bond. When you say you're going to do something, you do it to the best of your ability. And that when you're a working class kid in this society, you don't feel entitled to anything. You know that you're going to have to work for every single thing. You're going to have to be smarter, faster, better, work harder. You know that. And that you learn that you treat other people with respect and decency if you don't know them, and even if you don't agree with them, because that's the right way to treat your neighbor. And we learn that there's nothing more important in this life than your commitment to your family and community. See, that's why I married Barack Obama. Those values, that is it. He was cute, too. That helped. That helped. Let me be honest. But I liked his values more. And what I knew with a man like that I could raise a family with him, that I could build a life, and it would be whole and solid and stable. But see, then as I got to know him more, I knew how he struggled to live his values, not just understand them, but how do you make choices he always struggled with that reflect the notion that to whom much is given, much is expected. See, because both Barack and I, regardless of the fact that we didn't have a lot of stuff growing up, we knew we were blessed. See, because when you have love and stability and people sacrificing for you, you know you're blessed. Because you know not every kid gets that. So to whom much is given, much is expected. So Barack started out his life living that value. When he graduated from college, he didn't go to work on Wall Street and make a lot of money, which would have helped him pay down his debt. But he became a community organizer, working in some of the toughest neighborhoods on the south side of Chicago, with folks who had a real reason to be cynical because government had forgotten many of these folks in these neighborhoods. They had lost their voice and were living in unsafe streets, still are. Barack drove young mothers down to City Hall to fight for better schools and safe streets. He worked in those communities for years. And I say, just imagine a president of the United States who brings that kind of experience to the Oval Office. And let me tell you something. There is no other front runner in this race who can claim that kind of experience on the ground. No one else. And it would seem to me that before you'd even open your mouth to say that you were going to be president, you would have to show that kind of dedication on the ground to real people, period. But see, we don't ask for that. We give more credit to people who've run corporations or spent years in Washington. I don't know what's wrong with us sometimes. I don't understand it. It doesn't stop there. You know, Barack's a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, everybody's a lawyer. Too many lawyers. Nothing against lawyers, but you know there are too many of us. And Barack could have been a millionaire, so could have I many times over. But Barack believed that to whom much is given, much is expected. And when you have the gift of advocacy, when you are the first African-American president of the Harvard Law Review, which Barack was, and you can do anything in the world, you don't give your resources to the most powerful, you don't make money for yourself, you work on issues of justice and fairness. So he worked as a constitutional law scholar and worked in a civil rights firm, small one, in Chicago on housing discrimination, voting rights, employment discrimination, issues of fairness. Barack went into state senate not to amass power for himself, but what you learn when you work on the streets in Chicago and you work in courtrooms trying to employ laws that are not equal, that hope isn't enough. Barack isn't naive. He knows that you have to be able to affect the policies of the land in order to get real change. So he goes into the state senate, Illinois politics, mean, tough politics in Illinois. Works for 8 years as a state senator. No other front-runner in this race has had that kind of experience in a state legislative structure. It would seem to me that it would be helpful to have a president of the United States who understands how federal law impacts local government. And for 8 years, Barack worked in the minority in tough Illinois politics. So when people ask, is Barack tough enough? Can he handle the Republicans? You know, I just think, come on, people. You know, where do you think we have been? We've seen it all. We have seen it all. And in that climate, where Barack served in the minority, he was still able to work with his colleagues and get a lot done. He brought those values to his work. He didn't become part of the system. He said, let me see what happens if I operate with trust in and I connect with people, and I listen, and I build relationships across party. What can I get done? Because I think this can work. He was right. During that time, he helped to expand health care for kids in our state, helped to pass an earned income tax credit for the working poor, helped to fight racial profiling in our state, helped to pass ethics reform in a state that hadn't seen it in more than 25 years, helped to mend a broken death penalty system that sent dozens of innocent men to death row. See, these aren't the fights that you fight when you're trying to make friends, but when you're trying to make change. And Barack was successful because people trusted him. Barack is one of the most respected politicians in the state of Illinois because of those values. Not because he was mean, not because he was nasty, not because he had years sitting in those seats, but because he brought a new set of skills into the framework. And I just think, imagine a president of the United States who can get that kind of stuff done, who has that kind of a track record.